Welcome, and as part of our FreemanCapitalist.com series, we are interviewing today Dr. Larry Schweikart. Welcome, Larry.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm pretty good.
Good. Yeah, when you came out with your new book, What Would the Founders Say? It correlates very well with what we're trying to get across on FreemanCapitalist.com. We're trying to educate people about the Founding Fathers, kind of their view on things, how they set things up, and kind of where we're at today. So, I was really excited to see your book coming out, and I've read a lot of it. Really impressed with the things that you have in there. So,
well, the book was started. What the Founders Say came out really as a result of the Tea Party movement, and I would go to meetings. I've spoken at a lot of Tea Party meetings and Liberty Group gatherings, and people will always have their Constitution or, occasionally the Declaration of Independence, but and very occasionally have the Federalist Papers, but usually they won't have any more than that. And it's important those documents are absolutely critical, but you also have to know what founders meant when they used certain terms, such as the militia in the case of the Second Amendment, or the general welfare. What was the context or what was the setting that we placed the founders in, so that we can understand not only the meaning of the words that they wrote down, but more importantly, what was their intent when they wrote these words?
Yeah, and that's really important. I mean, today our politicians, Bill Clinton is twisting things and saying how it depends on what the meaning of the word is. So they're trying to take every little thing and twist it to interpret what they want to get out of it. So,
right. So
you've written this book in really plain terms, and which I think is really helpful because a lot of people don't understand the background of it, and you've given us really great information in this book.
I think that if you look at also the context that I wanted to provide was in terms of the economy, and this is both for conservatives and liberals. If you look, for example, at Alexander Hamilton, but any of the guys who came out in the of the Revolutionary era, none of these guys were capitalists, because capitalism had not even been invented as a theory until 1776 in Scotland. Certainly doesn't get to America for a few years, certainly doesn't get widespread dissemination for many years after that. Hamilton, Washington, Madison, all these guys were raised in the mercantilist system, and that's what makes our system so remarkable, is that already, despite their background, they were moving away from the whole concept of mercantilism and into what we would today call a capitalist background.
Yes. Was mercantilism, did they use more free market based for that?
Well, the mercantilist ideas of the day said that business existed for the benefit of government, not just to make a profit. I mean, the modern concept of business, let me put it another way. Probably in the 1800s, the concept of business was that business existed for the business owner and the shareholders and whatever. Today's concept of business is it exists solely for the employees to pay their retirement and their health care. Back then, the idea of business was that it existed to further the ends of government, and it didn't matter how much profit you made or whatever. If you were furthering the interests of the national government, then you were operating as a good mercantilist. So most of the founders were starting to break away from that and move toward the idea that business existed as an entity on its own, but a lot of them hadn't fully gotten there yet.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and as we see it kind of go through the phases, we got more away from, the government needing these businesses to support the armies and, the infrastructure to where it could stand on its own, and business could then be profitable for business instead of, to prop up the government to make sure that it stayed strong.
Yeah, exactly. Let's take a look, for example, at Hamilton, who I argue in What Would the Founders Say gets kind of a bad rap for conservatives. He's often portrayed by people like DiLorenzo and others as kind of a father of big debt and an advocate of big debt. He is not an advocate of debt. He said that a debt can be a national blessing if you pay it off. He was a fan of good credit, not high debt. And Hamilton saw the necessity of having the United States government absorb the debts of all the individual states that now comprise the U.S. government, pay them off once and for all, so that the U.S. would have good credit in case we needed it. And his concern, like Washington's, was we might end up in a war and have to borrow some money, and we need to be able to borrow money when we have to. Yeah. Now, Hamilton's great contribution, I think, and one he doesn't get nearly enough credit for, is he sets up a sinking fund to pay down the debt that is very much like a modern-day American Express card, whereby you have to pay off all old debt before you get to charge some more. And over the years, Congress has kind of gravitated to the notion of a Visa or a MasterCard, where you just keep charging and raising the limit and raising the limit. As long as you make your minimum monthly payment, you're okay.
Well, and we see where that's led. We're trillions of dollars in debt, and with no way out. I mean, these guys keep talking, but there's really no plan for solvency. There's no way to pay off our debt.
Well, I don't think they've yet come up with a comprehensive plan, but I do think the Republicans are trying. I think that Boehner is and Ryan are doing a yeoman's work in trying to hold the line on this, to not only start cutting, but to consistently cut. And that's the goal. If they were going to stop with $6 billion or $60 billion or $600 billion in cuts and say, all right, well, we did a great job, let's go home, then I'd be the first to worry about that. But remember, we didn't get into this overnight. And the liberals' approach to things is the Saul Alinsky approach, the Jerry Rubin approach, which is you issue a list of demands. When your opponent meets those demands, you come back with a new list of demands. Your demands are never satisfied. And we need to get in that framework. Thanks for the $60 billion in cuts or the $600 billion in cuts. Here's another $100 billion. And after that, we have another $100 billion. And just keep going and going and going. And you don't stop till you fixed it.
Well, and that's the thing. The path that Obama's put us on, well, and it was started somewhat by George Bush, but the path that we're on is just huge government and huge spending. And, he's not looking to curtail that at all. I mean, they might give us token cuts, but they're really not putting anything in from the administration standpoint of putting us back into fiscal sanity.
No, of course not. And I don't think you can even hold out a hope that Obama or the liberal Democrats are going to do anything to fix that, and that's not where the future of the country lies. I mean, the future of the country lies with the Republicans, and to the extent that the Tea Party can influence them, the Tea Party side of the Republican Party. But then let me point out to your listeners a couple of other things. In Jefferson's 8 years, the U.S. was able to pay off more than one-third of its national debt, which at the time, as a share of GNP relative to where they were, was very big. Not what it is now, but it was very big. So they paid off a third in 8 years. In the 1920s, Calvin Coolidge and Warren G. Harding and Andrew Mellon, through tax cuts, generated such economic growth, they paid off a third of the national debt in 5 years. So it is doable. It is doable relatively quickly. All you need to do is have determination and follow through with it. Get the economy rolling, start cutting government, and the combination of those two things will produce a balanced budget and end to national debt in relatively short order. I think it can be accomplished in a decade if you have dedicated people.
Well, and Ryan's come out with his budget, which will take
$6 trillion, I believe, off in the next 10 years. Which is a huge.
Which would be incredible. That would be phenomenal. And if that were to somehow pass, I doubt that it will. But if that were to somehow pass, yeah. But 2012 comes up. Say you get in just to make it funny, President Trump, who is very business oriented and certainly for all his faults understands debt and deficits, and he signs that. Think of the turnaround in business. Think of the turnaround in revenues to the government if all of a sudden everybody goes, we're serious about fixing this. All of a sudden, the old Annie song, the sun will come out tomorrow. Everybody starts singing the Annie song, and before you know it, the investment is up, jobs are up. Because people have jobs, they pay taxes. Tax revenues are up. Because people have money, they buy stuff. When you sell stuff, revenues are up again. Those sellers pay taxes, and the circle really starts. And that's what we saw in the 1920s, for example. It wasn't just the Mellon tax cuts. It was the Mellon tax cuts wedded to an economy that was poised to explode and was just waiting for the right opportunity. And I think we could do that again.
Well, and the thing is the greatness of our entrepreneurs in America, the greatness of our free market systems, being able to have the incentive to work and to keep what you earn, that is what drives it. And under our economy today, what you've seen progressives come in and create all these entitlement programs, which I believe we need to take care of the poor. We need to help people where we can, But the big question is, what is the role of government in that? And with the great entitlements that we've created, what can we cut, and how can we curtail those entitlements, get people off those entitlements?
Well, that's a good segue. I mean, I deal with what's government's role in providing for jobs and poor relief and that sort of stuff. And the founders, again, came from a background in England in which you had two classes of poor, and this had been going on for over 100 years in terms of how the English viewed things. You had the deserving poor, and the deserving poor were people who, through no fault of their own, were thrown out kind of on the streets. The widow, the orphan, the man who lost his job through no fault of his own, the factory closed, and received alms or support. They used to have what were called almshouses, would receive support for a limited time until he could get work again. And then you had the undeserving poor. And the undeserving poor are the people who use their welfare money to buy flat-screen TVs or more alcohol or drugs or whatnot. I always tell listeners this is a true story. I was in Vegas not too long ago, and in Vegas they had these walkways over the big boulevard there between New York, and MGM Grand, and there's usually a couple of beggars there. And you got the Vietnam guy, And then there was one this time who had a sign. He said, "Why lie? I like to drink." And people were just dropping money in his cup. Crazy, because here's an honest man at least.
Yeah, he's not pulling any punches. This is what I'm going to do about it. Well, one of the big questions that I really have is, Reagan, when he talked about socialized medicine, he quoted Norman Thomas saying that the American people would never vote for socialism. And Norman Thomas was 6 times candidate for president on the socialist ticket here in the United States. And
right.
He said the American people would never vote for socialism, but under the name liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program. How have you seen that happen?
That's been prescient. It's just like Americans will say they hate Congress, but their congressman is okay, and they will return him. And this is a very difficult thing. We saw in the 1800s how we were given various compromises over slavery, and at a time that certainly the American public would have voted slavery down, in an up or down vote by a majority. Nevertheless, through these various compromises, they were able to pit one state against another and to get different sections to appeal to their sectional self-interest, and it kept slavery in for another 30 or 40 years. And so I think that's what the liberals have done. I've always thought that the withholding of taxes was one of the most insidious things that was ever done. If you have to write that check yourself, and I just paid my taxes today, if you have to write that check yourself, you think a whole lot less about government and its ability to take your money than if you don't see that money.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of jokingly suggested the best single fix we could make would be to move tax day to November 1st, and have to pay all taxes in cash or check. And then, we would never again get any person anywhere near a liberal elected to Congress.
Yeah, that would be nice. But back to the socialism topic. How far have we come on the road to socialism here in the United States? We've adopted some of the liberal principles.
It's a lot further than I ever dreamed we would have. Even 10 years ago, I never would have thought that we would be bailing out large-scale corporations just because they want it, or that we would seriously even be discussing, let alone passing, a national health care bill. I mean, we're really far down that road, and it's scary.
What do you think the founders would say about the health care bill and how it was passed?
Well, it's ridiculous. I mean, first of all, there's no authority whatsoever in the Constitution to regulate, control, or otherwise affect people's individual health choices. All the founders were big eaters, drinkers, and smokers.
Yeah.
I think Washington would get out his musket, start polishing his musket if you talked about taking away his venison, but they were talking about taking away Happy Meals. And yeah, they're talking about taking away Happy Meals in New York City. I tell my students every year.
That, I believe, in San Francisco.
Yeah, and they're talking about banning salt. I tell my students they're coming for your ho-hos, they're coming for your ding-dongs, half jokingly, but it's true. I mean, if these people get their way in the name of health, they won't stop at anything.
Yeah. Well, and part of the cancer that I see of the progressive agenda, is just like healthcare. When we're all in it together, everybody has a stake in it. So, like you said in your book, it's going to pit the old against the young, the fat against the lean. It's going to pit us against each other, and there's obviously going to have rationing occur from that.
Well, yes, it can't help but have the effect if it is sustained and upheld in the courts and continues to be a part of our system. It can't help but have the effect of having neighbor ratting out neighbor. Hey, I know my neighbor's out there grilling steaks. You can't do that. You're affecting my health care, which is ridiculous. Up until this point, it's been, I don't agree with you smoking, but it's your lungs.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, but if we're all in it together, then we have a stake in it, and then people are going to worry about what other people are doing, and that's kind of the whole deal behind it. Is the government control,
right.
And we'd be ratting each other out.
Before we wrap, let me make sure, so I don't forget, that I give out our website so that everybody knows where they can pick up What Would the Founders Say. It's at www.patriotshistoryusa, all one word, patriotshistoryusa.com. And you can find all my books there, 7 Events That Made America, Patriots History of the United States, and 48 Liberal Lies. Plus, they are all available wherever books are sold. And then, as a result of the last book, 7 Events, I made a film last year called Rockin' the Wall about rock and roll music's part in bringing down the Iron Curtain. And we interviewed rock and rollers from both sides of the Iron Curtain and, witnesses from the other side of the Iron Curtain, great stories in there. Vanilla Fudge, The Doors, Yellow Jackets, Toto, all sorts of interesting people in there. And
I
the film is available.
You're a fellow drummer?
Yeah, and I got to meet a lot of these people in the course of doing that.
Oh,
and the
great.
film is available at rockinthewall.com, ROCKIN, rockinthewall.com.
Yes, and The Patriot's History of the United States is the #1 bestseller. What I love about your book...
It's not today, but it was the #1 bestseller last year.
Yes.
4 or 5 weeks on the top of the charts.
And I've read a good portion of What Would the Founders Say. I highly recommend it. It's a great book. Gives us great insight into the founders, what they established, and kind of what we're looking at right now, what they would say about our day and what we're doing with our government. So
right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schweikart.